The air in the Ruhr Valley tasted of defeat. It was a fine powder of coal dust, brick dust, and something else, something metallic and final, the scent of a great industrial heart that had ceased to beat. It was April 1945. The war, they said, was over. A technicality, really. The beast had been cornered, its limbs severed, but its brain was still firing in the dark, twitching with phantom commands. And my job was to slip into one of those synapses before it went cold. My name is Alistair Finch, or rather it was. In this particular corner of collapsing Germany, I was Herr Dr. Althaus, a functionary from the Ministry of Armaments with an airtight backstory and a profound disinterest in making eye contact. My German was more than fluent. It was native, honed in lecture halls and libraries, now my only shield. I was an academic playing dress-up in the ruins of a nightmare I had only ever studied in books. My mission, codenamed Operation Blackbird, was deceptively simple. Infiltrate the Kelber Institute, a high-security research facility near Essen, and exfiltrate their lead physicist, a man named Dr. Elias Kessler. London believed he held the keys to some of the Reich's last desperate projects. A simple asset retrieval, clean, precise, surgical. From the ridge overlooking the valley, the institute looked like a wounded animal. One wing was a skeleton of blackened steel and shattered glass, a gift from the RAF a few months prior. But the central complex was intact, humming with a low, constant energy, floodlights cutting cones of harsh white through the twilight gloom. The guards at the gate were old men and boys, Volkssturm, their faces grim with a faith that had outlived its god. They were the easy part. The real threat was inside. The SS detachment, the true believers whose loyalty was not to Germany, but to the idea of it, an idea that refused to die with the cities. My papers were flawless. The commandant, a gaunt SS Sturmbannführer named Richter, reviewed them with an unnerving stillness. His eyes were like chips of slate, scanning not just the text, but me, my posture, the faint tremor in my hand as I offered him a cigarette. He was a predator who sensed the slightest anomaly in his environment. Methodical observation was my trade, but Richter was a master. I was a student of history. He was a product of it. We were two sides of a tarnished coin. "Your visit is unexpected, Doctor," he said, his voice a dry rustle. "The lines of communication are not what they once were. The work of the Reich continues until the final breath, Sturmbannführer," I replied, my tone calibrated to the perfect pitch of weary fanaticism. "Certain projects must be archived for the future, for the reconstruction." He seemed to accept it, or at least he accepted the authority of the stamps on my papers. I was given a small, sterile room and a schedule. My meeting with Kessler was set for the following morning. That night sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I lay on the cot, listening to the sounds of the facility. The hum of generators, the distant clang of metal, the shouted orders that were a little too sharp, a little too brittle. This place was a microcosm of the Reich itself, a veneer of rigid order stretched thin over a core of pure panic. My fear was a cold, constant companion. It wasn't the fear of death, it was the fear of failure. The thought that a misspoken word, a single overlooked detail, could lead to the deaths of innocents, or worse, allow some vital piece of this malignant puzzle to slip away into the shadows, to be reassembled later. That was the ghost that haunted me. Kessler was waiting for me in his laboratory. He was a small man, swallowed by a white coat that was several shades of gray. He had the pallor of someone who lived without sunlight, his eyes magnified by thick spectacles. When I entered, he almost dropped a beaker. He knew who I was, of course. The recognition was a flicker of raw terror in his gaze. We spoke in academic pleasantries, our words a delicate dance around the truth. We discussed neutron scattering and isotopic separation, our conversation a shield for the real exchange happening in our eyes. He was terrified, but he was ready. The extraction plan was simple. A supply truck was scheduled to leave in 36 hours. He would be in it, sedated and hidden in a false-bottomed crate labeled sensitive equipment. My job was to ensure his documents, his research, came with him. It was then, as he began gathering his papers, that the mission changed forever. "This," he said, his voice barely a whisper as he pushed a thin file across the table, "is the work I have been doing for the last year. It is not what your people think it is." I opened it. It was full of schematics, logistical charts, chemical formulae. It was above my pay grade, scientifically speaking. "I don't understand, Elias." He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes, a gesture of profound exhaustion. "Everyone believes we are building wonder weapons for this war, a bigger bomb, a faster jet. We are not. We are building the weapons for the next one." My blood ran cold. He led me from the lab down a series of sterile corridors to a reinforced door marked archive. Richter's authority had granted me access, a fact Kessler used to his advantage. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of old paper and ozone. It was a librarian's dream and a spy's nightmare, rows upon rows of steel cabinets. "It's called Projekt Nachlese," Kessler whispered, his breath fogging in the chill. "Project Aftermath, or more accurately, Project Gleaning." He began pulling out drawers, showing me file after file. It wasn't just weapon designs. It was a comprehensive, meticulously detailed plan for a post-war insurgency, a technological Fourth Reich. There were plans for small, easily concealed magnetic mines to cripple reconstruction shipping. Blueprints for chemical agents that could be dispersed into water supplies, non-lethal but capable of causing mass panic and sickening entire cities. Schematics for sophisticated, long-range communication arrays that could be powered by a car battery and hidden in a barn. But it was the philosophy behind it that truly horrified me. I was a student of political science. I understood that ideologies have a life of their own. This was a plan to weaponize defeat, to turn the rubble of Germany into a breeding ground for a new kind of war. It wasn't about holding territory. It was about making the Allied occupation so costly, so terrifying, so unstable, that the West would eventually fracture and withdraw. It was a plan to keep the Nazi ideology alive on life support, sustained by chaos and fear, until it was strong enough to rise again. This wasn't the last gasp of a dying regime. It was the first breath of a new monster. My mission was to extract Kessler, but Kessler was just a man. This was the soul of the beast, codified on paper. Leaving it here was an intelligence failure of historic proportions, my deepest fear made manifest. "We must take all of it," I said, my voice hoarse. "Impossible," Kessler hissed, his eyes wide with panic. "There are hundreds of files. It would take weeks. The master directive, the list of cell leaders and cache locations, it's in Richter's personal safe. We will never get to it." My mind was racing. The methodical part of my brain, the part that organized footnotes and cross-referenced historical texts, took over. The mission had changed. The objective was no longer the man, but the information, and there was only one way to get it. I had to go deeper. I turned to Kessler, the plan forming, cold and terrible in my mind. "I need you to tell me everything about your rivals here, anyone who has ever crossed Richter, anyone he suspects of disloyalty." He stared at me as if I were mad. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give the Sturmbannführer what he wants most," I said. A traitor. It was the most dangerous gamble of my life. A double cross with me and Kessler as the chips on the table. The next morning I requested an urgent, private meeting with Commandant Richter. I presented him with a carefully edited selection of Kessler's files, enough to look damning, but scientifically obscure enough that Richter wouldn't immediately grasp their true purpose. "I believe Dr. Kessler is a saboteur, Sturmbannführer," I said, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. "I believe he is feeding information to outside elements, not the Allies' rival factions. Men who wish to see your authority here diminished." I was playing on his paranoia, on the internecine power struggles that plagued the Nazi hierarchy even in its death throes. I saw a flicker of something in those slate-gray eyes. He wanted to believe it. It affirmed his worldview, his place in a nest of vipers. "Prove it," he commanded. "Give me access to his full project file and the central registry of internal communications. Let me cross-reference his work. I'm an analyst, a researcher. I can find the pattern. I can uncover his network for you." He studied me for a long, silent minute. The air in his office was thick enough to chew. The entire war, my entire life, felt balanced on the edge of his decision. Then he gave a curt nod. "You have 2 hours. I will have Kessler detained. Find me the proof, Dr. Althaus." He led me to his office safe. He opened it and my breath caught in my throat. There it was, a thick, leather-bound folio stamped with a single, stark word, Nachlese. He handed it to me, along with keys to the secure archive. "Do not disappoint me." I felt a surge of chilling victory, but it was fleeting. Now the clock was ticking. I had the keys to the kingdom, but the king was standing right outside the door. I worked with a frantic, methodical precision I didn't know I possessed. I wasn't just reading. I was inhaling information, my student-trained mind identifying key documents, names, locations, my SOE-issued microfilm camera clicking away, capturing page after damning page. This was it, the entire network. The names of sleeper agents already being planted among refugee populations, the locations of arms caches buried in the Black Forest, the scientific formula for a new strain of wheat blight designed to devastate Allied food supplies in the first year of occupation. Time dissolved. The world shrank to the rustle of paper and the click of the camera shutter. Then the air raid sirens began to wail, a low, mournful howl that grew into a deafening shriek. The facility lights flickered, died, then came back on, powered by the emergency generators. The building shuddered as the first bombs fell on a nearby industrial park. It was my cover, but it was also my deadline. I had just finished the last page of the folio when the door to the archive crashed open. It wasn't Richter. It was two of his SS guards, but their eyes weren't on me. They were on the open files, the scattered papers. One of them had a radio handset to his ear. Richter had been talking to someone who knew what Projekt Nachlese really was. Someone who knew that no functionary from the armaments ministry should ever be allowed near it. My cover was blown. I didn't think. I reacted. I threw a heavy book of chemical tables at the nearest guard, a clumsy, academic act of violence. It caught him in the face. As he staggered back, I brought the butt of my microfilm camera down on the second guard's wrist just as he was raising his rifle. There was a sickening crack of bone. I ran. Down corridors that were now flickering between stark emergency light and absolute blackness. The thunder of the bombs outside was a symphony of chaos, masking my footsteps. I had the film. Now I had to get Kessler and get out. I found him in a holding cell, guarded by a single, ancient Volkssturm man who looked more scared than I was. I showed him my ministry papers, shouting over the din of the raid. Sturmbannführer's orders. The prisoner is being moved to the bunker. The old man, confused and terrified, fumbled with the keys and opened the door. I grabbed Kessler, who was pale with shock, and we plunged back into the maelstrom. We made it to the motor pool just as Richter and 3 more guards burst through a doorway, their torches cutting through the dust-filled air. "Halt!" he screamed, his voice raw with fury. There was no time for cleverness now, no more words. I had a Webley revolver tucked into my coat, a tool I had prayed I would never have to use. The metallic taste of fear flooded my mouth. I raised it, my hand shaking uncontrollably. I wasn't a soldier. I was a historian. But history was happening right now at the end of my arm. I fired twice. The noise was obscene, a physical blow in the enclosed space. One of the guards fell. Richter fired back, the bullet whining past my ear and shattering a window behind me. We scrambled towards the supply truck, the one meant for our extraction. The driver, one of our contacts, saw us coming and started the engine. Its roar was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Kessler and I piled into the back, tumbling onto canvas sacks that smelled of potatoes and damp earth. As the truck lurched forward, crashing through the main gate, I saw Richter one last time, standing in the glare of the headlights, his face a mask of pure hatred, firing his pistol uselessly after us. We drove into a world on fire. Essen was burning. The sky was red and black, and the ruins of the city were silhouetted against the flames like broken teeth. I lay there in the dark, the truck jolting beneath me, Kessler muttering prayers beside me. In my pocket I could feel the small, dense weight of the microfilm canisters. They felt colder and heavier than any stone. I had gone in to retrieve one man. I came out carrying the seeds of a future war. The bombing raid that had saved our lives had likely destroyed the Kelber Institute, burying Projekt Nachlese under tons of rubble. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my very core, that the idea itself had not been destroyed. I had the documents, the names, but an idea doesn't die when you shoot it. I had won the engagement, secured the intelligence. But that night, driving through the inferno of a defeated nation, I understood my war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The battles to come wouldn't be fought in trenches or with tanks. They would be fought in quiet rooms, in archives, in the minds of men for decades to come. And that victory would be far harder to define. The weight of that knowledge is a burden I carry to this day. These memories are heavy, but they must be shared. Subscribe to ensure these stories are never forgotten.